Welcome to today's MESUD Learning Community ECHO, Strengthening Indigenous Responsiveness, Culturally Respectful Care for Substance Use Disorders. Today, we'll be hearing from Kylee Francis-Fowler on peer support models within the Indigenous community. My name is Kristen with CCSME, and I'll be supporting today's webinar along with my colleague, Casey. Just a few quick notes before we begin. The MESUD learning community acknowledges that we are all on ancestral lands of the Wabanaki Confederacy. We have a responsibility to acknowledge our Indigenous connections and the histories, past and present, of Indigenous land dispossession. Neither the presenter nor the planners have any relevant financial relationships to disclose. This activity has been planned and implemented in accordance with the accreditation requirements and policies of ACCME through the joint providership of the Hanley Center for Health Leadership and Education and CCSME. The Hanley Center is accredited by the MMA Committee on Continuing Medical Education and Accreditation to provide CME for physicians. Recording and live stream transmission of this webinar without consent is not permitted. And with that, I will let Kylee introduce herself.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Casey, for your help as well. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. My name is Kylee Francis-Fowler. I am a member of the Penobscot Nation. I reside and work here in my community for the Penobscot tribe. I am the peer recovery advocate. I am actually pioneering this position for the Penobscot Nation. It's the Tribal Healing to Wellness Corps program. So I believe as an alumni of Healing to Wellness Corps program, I get to have that firsthand lived experience to go through and actually help those that have entered our program. The peer role to me seems like I finally was able to get a label on what I've been doing kind of for a long time. I identify I'm a person in long-term recovery. Recovery from substance use disorder, and getting to utilize my lived experience here in my own community. It really helps me anchor and remember that we're all interconnected. I get to share my strengths and encourage those that recovery is possible. So today I've got some slides that I would ask Casey to share. All right, so yes, the peer support within our Indigenous community. Like I said, I get to pioneer this role, but I've had to outsource and reach out to a lot of other folks across Indian country that have been doing a very similar thing. I'm a peer support specialist. I've taken the CCAR recovery coaching training as well. And I've also been able to complete my peer support specialist role training that was provided through the Maine DHHS. But also before that, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a mother, and I get to use my alumni experience going through the Penobscot Nation Tribal Healing to Wellness Corps program to help the next generation. Next slide, please. Today, I would really like to just kind of, mention the innate knowing that I believe myself and, every other human has inside, that innate knowledge. I will talk about the Wellness Corps program itself, the interconnectedness, and the power of language. And we will get into some of my skills, my responsibilities, and some of the challenges that I've had to overcome, and some of the challenges that I've just got an ongoing, since taking this role on. And we'll finish up with some takeaways and some questions. So please, I would really like to be able to be as of service as anybody has, any questions at the end. So we can get to the next slide, please. So I really appreciate how this platform in the beginning acknowledges the land that we are on. You know, Turtle Island is home to my ancestors. You know, and my ancestors, I share that bloodline, that lineage. You know, I really believe like my gifts that creator has given me like has been there the entire time. It was developed way before I even probably been able to walk, you know, this physical earth right now. Just my inner knowings, you know, that innate knowledge, and being able to have that supported in the right environment with the right people makes me realize that, you know, what I've needed to be of service and to help my community heal has really been inside of me the entire time. All right, next slide, please. Collaboratively and holistically. And these are just a couple of quotes that I encompass and I think of often when it's direct peer-to-peer, person-to-person, or even you know, learning about the different programs each of our departments over here at the Penobscot Nation have, and learning that, you know, it's not just a I thing it's a we. You know, the holistic importance of substance use disorder to me is like looking at the whole person, not just a case to be managed. And I'm not sure where this quote came from. I wish I could have found the direct author, but changing the I to we in the word illness really becomes wellness. You know, because wellness isn't just the medical part. Wellness just isn't eating right. Wellness isn't just exercising. It really is all of the aspects if you think of it holistically. And I really believe that, you know, for the success of and the longevity of, you know, recovery or just the wellness journey, you have to encompass the whole person. Next slide, please. All right, just a little about me. I'm a person in recovery. I entered the Penobscot Nation, the Healing to Wellness Corps program. I wasn't really sure what I was signing up for, but it gave me some accountability. It gave me support from folks that were professionals. I had a really amazing case manager, a couple of them actually, and they believed in me. I got to be introduced to some cultural spin-offs of like some other formats for recovery programming, like a Wellbriety, figuring out that my Indigenous ways are my strengths. My strengths are what's really my gift and my powerful, you know, my passion behind this. And realizing, you know, our ancestors had that naturally. They naturally were attuned with living in the natural laws and the harmony of Earth, you know. I believe that I belong to the earth. I believe that I belong amongst everything else, as in like the animals, the fish, you know, like plants. It amazes me, like plants and trees and flowers, they just know when to bloom. They just know when to close up when it's cold at night. They just know intuitively. It's natural. Same with like our animals. Once it start getting the change of seasons, they just know when to start, you know, harvesting those acorns and nuts away for the upcoming, you know, winter. Just like our sun and our moon, it just knows when to set and to rise. And the moon and how powerful it is that it controls the oceans, it controls the water. Knowing that I'm a part of the earth in the sense of like even the water inside me can also be affected by the moon. And I sit and I think often of like how grateful I am to be able to be here right now even with, the attempted genocide of our ancestors. But even just beyond just, the Indigenous people, just the generations ongoing, we are here because of the people before us. And to really think that we can make a difference today to the generations ahead of us, that all the interconnectedness is always going to be part of me. And some days, even on the challenging ones, I can sit back and realize and keep it simple, keep it one day at a time, and just know that, to walk on a good path with integrity, it's been a passion. It just comes naturally now. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, so here's a little bit on the Penobscot Nation Tribal Healing to Wellness Court. The court recognizes that, recovery from addiction and the long-term management of mental health issues are vital to community, to safety, and to individual accountability. The Penobscot Nation Healing to Wellness Court leverages characteristics of its program as its foundation for wellness. The relatives in the program are supported and helped along the way of recovery and just the continued care. It does, depends on a folks' legal statuses and requirements and conditions. We have cases where charges have been dismissed upon completion of this program. Charges that could potentially be so discouraging when looking for a job placement later on in the future. Looking at the relative as they come in as a whole person. I was able to use some of my trainings and some of my knowledge as a direct person with this, that have, I deal with this every day. I'm in recovery and I'm proud of it. And I was able to use some of my input on, rewriting some terminology here in the program. When we see the word participant, sometimes or a client, it could be taken away the individuality. I was able to, ask the team and the judge here, what about maybe using the term relative for our handbooks that go out to folks that come in? A handbook for a participant, it's not very personable. So using the term relative has actually been quite, it's been a different outcome so far. And it's gone off, referring to those that I get to support here as relatives, because in a sense, like, we're on this pathway together and we are forever going to be family now. It is my wellness family here. And it's a very intense program. In the beginning, it's a lot of checking out yourself, and, we are very therapeutic when we're trying to support behavior change, with really understanding that, in the beginning phases of someone's recovery, is just showing up is really important. We give thanks and a lot of, incentives to the fact of just showing up, just being honest, just being there. And I remember for me, it was kind of foreign at first coming into this program, and having these folks not want to punish me because of mistakes that were happening, but these mistakes that I was was doing was kind of just a part of recovery. My brain was healing. My frontal cortex was just learning all these new things to me, this new way of life. And but after a while, I loved coming into our court hearings and having everybody there and saying a good positive thing for me. It was a little weird at first, but those positive words of enforcement, of encouragement, really ended up brightening my day. The 4 paths, it is all individual too. This is kind of just what it looks like, but upon completion of each one, by the end of it, you're gonna have some really monumental, potential, life-changing ways to live by. We honor the medicines. Tobacco was one of our first medicines as a people. The cedar and sage and sweetgrass. Our program looks like at a minimum of 12 months. And it's really having an aftercare plan is what seems to be the most important. It's one thing when you're in a program, you're showing up, you have the safety net of these people. You have these people that you know that you're going to be there. And what happens at the end when you commence? We do have a 1 year, like an aftercare plan, and we really encourage folks to stick around afterwards. So I've been able to do an alumni group. It was something so aftercare, because we're a family. We don't just, all right, I'm gonna erase your phone number out of my work phone because you're commenced now. No, how about if you would like to, you can come to the alumni groups. And I like to make events, whether, seasonable. Hey, let's go take a hike up Chick Hill together. Hey, let's go take a walk on the bog walk. Hey, let's go have a picnic down at Lincolnville Beach or something. And I've noticed there's more people wanting to stay involved after commencement date. And there's so actually a couple of quotes that I have some from alumni. I have one saying, "Healing to Wellness Court really helped me when I needed it the most. I was lost on the wrong path, not knowing which way to go. Then I was told about a program, which I'm so grateful for. Since entering and going through it, it has helped me gain the tools and knowledge to be able to help myself. Having the cultural experience made me feel whole again and led me down a better path. I'm so grateful for the experience that I had with the court. The program is really what you and you alone make it. I recommend this program to anyone who is desiring change in their life." And I'll just read one more. "What did Wellness Court do for me? It gave me accountability, showed me honesty, and a sense of belonging. It gave me hope." All right, next slide, please. So the program here is really about that braided services. If you think about a sweetgrass braid, one sweetgrass stand alone can only be so strong. But the more you put in, the stronger it is. Here are some programs that we use, case management, collaborative efforts with the programs around here on Penobscot Nation. With our housing, we have an MAT program at the IHS, the health center here. We've also collaborated with some Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness. Why think that we can only have to do things here on our reservation, but why not outsource? What other resources are out there? We're always up for, getting in new resources. My resource binder is ongoing. It's a task that needs to be updated, frequently. The most important, I really believe, is we have our once a week groups. And I've been able to ask folks of the community, some elders, maybe an individual who has some stories to tell. I've had an elder come in and do in the winter time when it's like that's our ancestral time to share stories and oral storytelling. She came in and oh man, it was really enlightening to have her voice. She had some of the language there. And it also helps introduce the folks in the program here that may have felt alienated from the community to see those faces, to get familiar with those people that are in the program here. And then the most recent one was my position here, the peer support role. Having walked in their shoes and actually intentionally mean that. It is one thing to hear maybe from a case manager, from a counselor, the judge even, that you're doing a great job, or maybe try this or suggest that, but like I get to utilize some of the darkest times of my life and how I got through that to support others. I get to walk alongside them, and that mutuality, it's kind of like one of those untalked about things that I share in common with the relatives that come in. Like I do get to disclose some of the things, and learning to hone my talent on when to disclose, when not to, but also it's that trust. The trust because we get to talk the same language. I believe addiction kind of chose me in a way, in a weird acceptance. Like I think I've had to go through those dark times and I've had to learn those lessons. So I really can help and, lead some others that have had similar stories. But I learn a lot from the folks that come in here. Because as an interdisciplinary team, I don't vote on whether someone's in full compliance. I don't vote whether or not there's anything like court wise. Like I don't abstain because I think it's a little bias of like, of course, I just want everybody to win. But that's the accountability that the rest of the team here have. And we all sit every other week in a team meeting. There's a full table of the programs here you see on screen. And then we have some others that, get to weigh in their advice, and being able to sit at that table and know that maybe sometimes when they have a question about use story, like I get to use my lived experience. I can't go into details, but I get to use the things that I've gone through myself to, open a different perspective on these professionals at the table that have only read about addiction in their trainings and their classes, have only maybe read about it in a book, but that was just another piece of being seen as a whole person. Like I am a peer professional. I do get to relate to the relatives coming in on a different level. And it's something to be very, very proud of. And I would love to eventually foster this for the new participants that are coming in that, there have been a few that have wanted to explore what that looks like after graduation for themselves to also become a peer. Because it's going to be an ongoing thing. There's going to be a generation that I don't really relate to yet, but I'm sure that I can help encourage a newer person to step into that role eventually. So, next slide, please. All right. Well, for the anonymity of the folks here, here's some feet. Here are some things that we get to do together, as a wellness family. I wish in the great perfect world of not just our tribal community, but programs around just collaborate, because I know that every day, like I'm a student. I'm willing to be a student of life. Like what lesson is here today? And I'm never going to have them all, but I can definitely find somebody in that role, if we collaborate and work together. Um, our tribe here, the Penobscot Nation, we're non-gaming. So figuring out cool ways to fundraise or to figure out what grants are out there. My role is funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance, which was created in 1984 to help reduce violent crimes and create a safe community. And honestly, just having a peer makes building trust within these programs like real. Having someone from the community that knows these names or knows directions and how to get into this building and which office is where, and like they're like, okay, you are familiar to me. You seem safe. I've had folks that might have had like a bad experience at one time with maybe a certain program or certain, phase, just because the stigma is still there. We can pretend it's not, but it is. The stigma is still there. But the more folks that are feeling safe to open up and share some of their challenges, like with me, or even like in our group settings or, et cetera, like living in recovery is something to be proud of because it is courageous. You have to be brave to do new things. And I get to be almost like a cheerleader in a sense for that, you know? Can I have the next slide, please? Whew. All right, again, with my spirituality, I get to really, really sit and give thanks intentionally to the fact that I had an ancestor somewhere in my lineage, you know, generations before me, probably terrified of what it would be like if they were to sing a song because at the time things were outlawed. The fact that somebody through my bloodline kept those songs, kept that information, and prayed that it would stay has given me so much hope, and like it makes me feel powerful to realize like I am part of that. I was probably prayed for by my ancestors following to me. And it does, like when I get to hear a drum and feel my heartbeat and realize like we are all just a part on this earth, but we are all interconnected. You know, my lifestyle now is healthy and safe. I respect the earth. I live intentionally with like just wanting to give out good vibes, but also learning like it's not always going to be like that, and understanding that mistakes is how we grow. The uncomfortable parts of growing, just like a caterpillar turning to a butterfly. You know, you envision that it has to get all squished and uncomfortable before it gets to grow into this beautiful, beautiful creature. The Healing to Wellness Court gets to connect people with the community. You know, I'm not a great sewer or a beater, but I know people who are. We've had a couple of relatives host ribbon skirt making classes. We've had a relative host and give back to the program a couple of groups on how to bead, like the dangly earrings. And it's like being able to meet them where they're at with the skills they already have. You just light it up. Like you put a spotlight on the things that you're already seeing that they're good at. Leadership skills because of being able to help somebody that's struggling alongside them in a group. You know, a lot of people sometimes won't do that, you know, but the sense of belonging in that family-like dynamic, like it does. I've seen some folks come in here like that would totally not take me um as nurturing and like a hands-on role, and they have blown me away because they've seen so and so maybe across the table struggling with a part to do something, and they would get up and go show them how they did it. And it's just that peer model of one person doing it and picking it up, having the support and encouragement, and them feeling confident enough in their skills to give it on to another. You know, tapping into that, like my own lived experience. I got to hear this at a conference not long ago of like the acronyms behind the names, you know. I am a PSS. I can say that I'm a peer support specialist, but that to me just didn't embody the skills and the things that I feel confident at. But then she's like, well, why can't you just put PWLE? And I'm like, well, what does that stand for? She says a person with lived experience. And it gave me like a whole different outlook. And I'm like, you know what? I can do that. You know, so as like the first slide, you see my name, and PSS is a little familiar, you know, but that PWLE, you know, because that lived experience is something you can't read from a book. And being able to see each other as we are, as a whole person, not an addict in their name, but just my name is Kylee. You know, the healing knowledge that my ancestors had for like I honestly just feel blessed to be able to even pass that on. All right, can I have the next slide, please? All right, the power of language. I believe when my first intake, our first interactions makes all the difference. I'm not picking up a folder, reading off, oh, it's your date of birth, this, and this. I get that. That's medical. That's a little bit clinical. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I introduce my name. I ask theirs. And I don't talk about diagnosis. I don't talk about medications. I really like to ask them, all right, well, they're up for, what was your childhood like? But in the sense of, are you a part of the community? Do you feel like a cultural orphan? Do you feel like you can connect to some songs, or do you have any cultural, knowledge? I have mm, I have a privilege that I grew up here on the reservation. I have a privilege that I got to have Penobscot language as my class in school here. To me, that was normal. My addiction likes to isolate. My addiction likes to think that I'm not welcome or I'm not a part of. So there was a long time in my life that I was very isolated from my community. Um, the opposite of addiction is connection. And once I realized I was capable of finding a new way of living, I wanted to go back into my community right where I had these self-imposed labels because I wanted to rewrite those labels. And in order to do that, the power of language is so important. Those labels I put on myself, come to find out the only power they had was the power I gave them. The folks in my community, sometimes when I got to reintroduce myself in this professional way, like they didn't realize some of these things. And it was the power because the words that I was telling myself. So I introduce myself as a person. I like to say I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a mother. I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll throw in there that I'm a person in recovery. I don't like to introduce as I'm an addict. I'm a drug addict. Or I have suffered from co-occurring illnesses. But having the professionalism to promote your self-sufficiency as myself, because I truly believe like self-love is so important. And to love yourself, the words you tell yourself are so important. The words that you get to hear from the people you work with, the people you connect with the most are so important. The term relative, you're a relative of the program. You're not a participant. We are a family. And then also too, excuse me, I put in a proposal last year to change some language in our assignments. The relatives in the program get assigned. Well, I don't have it right handy, but it was a thick stack of papers, and right on the top it said relapse prevention plan. I don't know about anybody here, but if anyone's, familiar with the recovery community and like as a person in recovery, hearing that word relapse is just like, it was so undignifying. Who would want to admit they relapsed? No, you know, it has that negative stigma around it. I put up the proposal to maybe we can use a word like recurrence, you know, recurrence. Recurrence prevention plan. I mean, we do shorten it to an RPP, but it's something that we plan and we use for a protection. So when some of these things do happen, maybe we can see the warning signs before an actual recurrence happens. I've learned that in recovery, and a recurrence can often be seen way before the physical of picking up a substance happens. It's usually the telltale signs of, you know, mine actually, we'll use some of my telltale signs. When I did my plan was I would stop answering the phone. I would only maybe text message, or maybe some of my appointments that were coming up, I would reschedule them, or the famous no-shows. And then there was even a part of my plan that had a big star on it. When you see me doing this, call me out on it. And it was when you see me getting defensive about simple questions, that was on my plan, you know? So these recurrence prevention plans, it is, if they get to, they do, like the folks that come in here are able to tell on themselves in a sense that, all right, let's put it on paper. When we can see some warning signs happening, you know, let's prevent this. Because it's usually an emotional breakage or an emotional disconnect from the program or from others before the actual picking up of the substance happens. So, all right, can I have the next slide, please? All right, my skills. I will start off with the SIPS, the Certified Intentional Peer Support Training. I can tell you that this one was the last one I did of some of my credentials, and I tell you what, this has been the most profound one. There's a lot of skills in there that I got to use, and because I believe that the SIPS training is more broad, it's not just concentrated on substances and recovery, but it is for everything. You know, folks that are also dealing with some co-occurring illnesses, you know, hearing voices. They've had classes for alternatives to suicide, because sometimes that's people's reality. Having to understand, like, I got to meet people where they're at, you know. I'm sure right now, us on the screen, like, have the screen set up in all different views. You know, right now you guys are over here, maybe on another, the pictures are on the top or the bottom. Nobody's wrong. It's all just a different perspective. And the active listening, that one was like the mama in me just wanted to listen and fix, listen and fix. But sometimes people just want to listen. Sometimes they just want to vent. And, you know, substance use, it's not a moral failing. It's a disease. It's insidious. And just having support and love until, you know, someone can love themselves. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, the recovery coach training, the CCAR Recovery Coaching Academy. This is where I believe the concentration of the substances come in. Learning the pillars of success, learning about, you know, like how to support one another when another person is feeling hopeless. It helps maintain like your motivation. And sometimes if you're, you know, whatever it is your recovery is looking like, that to-do list can seem daunting. It really can. But this one really helped me maintain my balance of energy to, like, you know, just support and not do things for people. But also don't be a gopher or a go-to. I'm not a taxi driver. I'm not a go do things for you type, but I will empower you to make that decision for yourself. Or I will empower you to do whatever it is that you feel like you want to obtain, you know, in your recovery journey. Can I have the next slide, please? The White Bison Institute. All right, so the White Bison Institute. I never knew up until what, almost 5 years ago, that there's a whole institute that has cultural and traditional practices intertwined with some recovery formats. Wellbriety. I've got to take a training to be a facilitator of Wellbriety meetings. I host them now weekly. I saw a need in my community. We didn't have a recovery group over here anymore after COVID. So I followed through and I got the trainings, and now our community has one. Last night, I had about 16 people on Zoom from across the country. So not only is it in person, it also broadcasts virtually. So that opens up a lot of recovery, a lot of useful information. Don Koyas is the creator and one of the founders of the Well Variety Institute, well, White Bison Institute. This is where I felt more of a connection with the cultural traditions of, where my special talents can be used into the peer world, because of course, Indigenous communities, we are different. We have different needs. We have different cultural, components that me going out outsourcing, if I wasn't successful, I went for my own personal, journey. I went to several other institutions to get well. And I think that was the part that was missing for me, is the spiritual component. White Bison Institute introduced me at the spiritual component on living well and being on the good trail. The Red Road is what they call it. And can I have the next slide, please? Oh, my responsibilities. These are my get-tos, the things I get to do. I get to remember that I am a person. I am a mom. I am a human. I make mistakes, but living my life every day with integrity, almost as if like I get to role model in a way. I didn't really have a lot of great personal role models growing up, but I know what I didn't want to be role modeled. And if someone's looking into the peer role, like you really do, you need that solid reputation of knowing that, okay, well, once I leave this office job here and I hang up my work badge, I'm still the same person. I'm still living in recovery. I want folks to know that, it's not just a job. Like you have to role model it. You have to be in the know of like upcoming things and resources in the community. Be able to provide support and mentorship. And most of all, like you need self-care. Self-care, knowing when your boundaries, knowing what you're going to do and what you can't do. I've had to learn some the hard way. Um, you know, especially in my community, knowing some of these folks on a very intimate level, you know, um, but I've learned that my success as a person does not have anything to do with somebody else's success. I myself, not one person can ever make somebody want to get sober. Not one person can ever make somebody want to be well. But what I'm doing helps me be well and it helps fill my cup. And if my cup, how the whole saying goes, if my cup is running over, then that means I have more to give. And learning what my boundaries, what I will, what I won't, what I can't is really, really important. That self-care piece, I probably could have had a whole slide just on that. But my responsibilities here are just, folks come in, sometimes they don't know what a meeting looks like, a recovery meeting looks like, or they don't know there's a whole world on Zoom of 24/7 recovery meetings. And I get to build that with them. I get to show them there's a world out there of people that are just like them and myself. Um, the SIPs, the four fundamental tasks, is just your connection, the worldview, the mutuality, and moving towards. Kind of like how Don Koya says in White Bison, that our minds and our visions is what we want to be creating and to move towards. We don't want to be thinking about what we don't want, because what we don't want is still going to create an image. We want to move towards what we want. Okay, we can acknowledge the things that we don't want, but we have to have a vision in support of what we want to move towards. Have the next slide, please. Ooh, so when I graduated the Wellness Court program back in 2022, I was given an opportunity to apply for a peer recovery advocacy role at the Healing to Wellness Court. I didn't know what that was, but you know what? I know that I was liking doing my meetings. I was liking being able to share some of my story with others and get input and suggestions on maybe what worked for them and what didn't. But it never existed here before. So I did. I had to outsource and search across the country on what peer, echoes are out there. I didn't know what an echo was. I found Lindy Siebel. She's of Oklahoma, and she ends up hosting a monthly Indian country peer echo. So I found her. I started going to these echoes every month, and it helped give me, connections with what was going out there in Indian country. It helps me realize that, hey, I'm having this problem. I can bring it to these people that are doing something similar that I am, and I can get help. The state of Maine has its own boundaries and ethics for the SIPs. The Recovery Coaching Academy has its own boundaries and ethics for recovery coaching. But I was missing the aspect of our cultural components, our traditional components. That is different. It is different because our community it's intimate. Who's to say that I'm not going to have an auntie or a cousin or even a brother or a sibling who might be out there struggling and want to come into the program. That's not really out there for the state of Maine yet. So that was something I really was hoping for. And I ended up finding something. But for right now, can I have the next slide, please? Actually, I think I'm getting ahead of myself on this one. Oh, okay, never mind. So yeah, the peer support for Indigenous communities, being able to ask to do this was it was most supposed to happen. It really was. I feel that. I know Denise and Terry from Healthy Acadia, who did my recovery coaching. They now have a coacher supervision, which is also meets monthly for those that are serving the Indigenous community. I'm a part of that because it's different. We have different cultural components that I can't find elsewhere, but they do exist in other bigger tribal communities, and the most of them that were gaming tribes that had a lot of resource money to come in for these programs. So, so I think I'm all right with time. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm going too far over. So, my hope for the future, is I would like to have more of a broad policies and ethical considerations written down for our Wabanaki communities as a peer-to-peer model, and what would that look like? And this is kind of like my Key's presentation as well, is like, what is that going to look like for those that we're serving right now? What does that look like for the Indigenous folks that are maybe being seen outside of their intertribal, programs? And also, like, how do I keep those people wanting to stay engaged? How do we keep them wanting to be a part even after the quote unquote treatment or wellness plan has their goals crossed off? How do we encourage and support people to want to be a part of this as a lifestyle choice and not just checking it off? For me, like, I was blessed. Like, I feel like I fell into my calling. I fell into something that my soul needed. Yeah, thank you guys.